Go over to our big spotlight for this evening. The government has set the ball rolling as far as the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund is concerned. The Finance Minister today chaired the first meeting of the NIIF in Delhi, and in attendance were all the members of the Governing Council. The government plans to finalize at least 2 overseas investors who will be investing in this fund by the end of January. Several sovereign funds from the United Kingdom, UAE, Singapore and Russia have all expressed interest in the fund. The initial corpus for the fund will be one of the biggest, which was, remember, was one of the big announcement that was made by the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley in his speech. The initial corpus will be of at least 20,000 crore rupees, though the government is ideally aiming at raising 40,000 crore rupees. This will be used to fund commercially viable but stuck infrastructure projects initially before expanding its scope to cover other projects which have a long gestation period. Now I'm joined by the Economic Affairs Secretary Shaktikanta. In fact, he is one of the members of the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund. Thank you very much, Mr. Das, for joining us. So if you could just once again outline the basic rationale, sir, of this initiative, because we understand that this initiative has been inspired, by the sort of funds we see in Singapore, like the Temasek. We have a similar fund in the UK, the Green Investment Fund. But many are wondering, in the India context, how will this work? Because many of the infrastructure projects are already getting low-cost finance from corporations like JICA. Even the BRICS banks will be up and operational from April. So how will this be different, sir?
You see, for the borrowings which we are doing from JICA or the one which we will borrow from the BRICS bank, they are similar to the borrowings we do from World Bank or the Asian Development Bank, and they are reflected in the balance sheet of the government. In other words, they are borrowings by the government which form part of the overall fiscal deficit of the government, because they are a part of government expenditure. Government borrows and then government gives it either to the implementing project or the state government or to the concerned ministry. So they are a part of the balance sheet of the government. They are part of the government borrowing program, obviously adding to the fiscal deficit numbers. This is completely different. This is a fund which is being set up at a reasonably arm's length distance from the government. Government will eventually have not more than 49% of the equity. So therefore, this fund will be able to attract investments from various pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, sovereign wealth funds from countries you have just mentioned, UK, UAE, Singapore, Russia. We are in discussion with the sovereign funds and the pension funds from this country. So this fund will be able to attract funds which will invest into this fund. And then this fund will give long-term finance to various infrastructure projects. So therefore, in that way, it is completely different from what we have, or what we do through the JICA funds or from the World Bank or the New Development Bank funds.
Fair enough, sir. In fact, so, if one were to do a Google search, we can see the sort of interest this has generated even in some of the overseas countries, especially in the Middle East and parts of Asia as well, sir. So you've mentioned some of the countries and some of the pension funds that you're in talks with. When do we then serve? When are you hopeful that we will see the first tranche of the money coming into this fund?
Yeah, let me spell out the action that has been taken. You see, today we had the first meeting of the Governing Council of the NIIF. Now, the entire NIIF will function under the overarching oversight of the Governing Council chaired by the Finance Minister, and today was the first meeting of that. But over the last 3 to 4 months, a lot of action has been taken very silently. We have already registered the NIIF Trust Limited. We have also registered the NIIF Investment Company Limited. You see, one is a trust which will be a pool where the funds will come in. And then there is an investment company which will take the decision with regard to the investments to be made. We have also positioned this investment company as a AIF Category 2, and yesterday we have got SEBI registration also for this to be an alternative investment fund Category 2. Now, this is the action which we have taken. Today, the action taken were reported to the Governing Council. Our effort now is to try and finalize at least 2 major investments into the NIIF before the end of January. That is our effort. Okay. And also a few shelf of projects were discussed today in the Governing Council. Governing Council will not decide on the actual investment because that is subject to appraisal and other things. So therefore, a lot of action has been taken. Before end January, we would be able to mobilize a lot of resources into the NIIF and also in a position to make commitments with regard to the specific investments that this fund will make in infrastructure projects.
Fair enough, sir. Just a couple of more questions, sir, because you preempted my next question, which was really the fact is that the mandate is that this is going to invest in greenfield, brownfield projects, stall projects. And also, so can you roughly tell us the basic criteria on which these decisions would be made? And I'm given to understand what the governing council will take that call?
No, first thing is that the investment decisions will be taken by the investment company. Because the governing council is just is mainly an oversight body which will give overall broad guidelines to the NIIF. But the investment decision will be taken by the NIIF Investment Company Limited. And NIIF company, has already, we have, for the next 6 months, we have retained, we are engaging IIFCL, India Infrastructure Finance Company Limited, as our investment advisors. So they will do the appraisal and they will place their report before the NIIF Investment Company Limited. Now, as regards the kind of projects, the first criteria is that they have to be commercially viable, and wherever there are stalled projects, as and when that is taken up, these also have to be commercially viable. And the commercial element, because ultimately, you see, when you are attracting investment from other countries, from pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, obviously they would expect a certain minimum level of return. So commercial viability and feasibility of projects is the first requirement. Second, the priority will be to invest in infrastructure funds, infrastructure projects, which typically require long-term funds.
Right. Absolutely. And so my final question, so you very articulately put sir, like how this would be different from the loans that India takes from JICA, because this won't be on India's books, and therefore fiscal deficit will not be sort of hit because of that. Also, some would say that this comes in at a time also when our banks are very stressed owing to the high levels of NPA. So clearly that would also that was clearly also one of the thinkings, I'm guessing, especially at a time when banks are also under a lot of pressure, that this could sort of take up part of the responsibility to fund our infrastructure space.
Absolutely, you are right. But can I just conclude? I just would like to mention that the decision taken by the government is a very, very timely decision, especially for the reasons which you have mentioned. Apart from long-term requirement of funds, the banks also have their own stress levels. So the decision of the government is a very timely decision, and I think this decision is going to make a very big impact in the infrastructure sector in the country. 2016, you will see a lot of action, a lot of investments coming out of this NIIF into infrastructure projects.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaktikanta. We know it's pretty late in the evening and you've had a long day. Thank you very much. We'll keep coming back to you on that story. Thanks so much for joining us on The Big Picture. So big plans.